There's a silent moment, so easily missed, yet it holds the immense power to shape your life. It comes between the thing that happens to you and the thing you do about it. Most people never see it. It slips past like a shadow. They don't pause, they don't think, they just react. Like a spark jumping instantly to fire, their nervous system takes the reins and drives them forward, not with wisdom, but with instinct. A raised voice, an unexpected setback, a harsh word. Before their mind even registers the event, their body flinches, tightens, lashes out. That's how most people live, as if every moment is a test they have to pass in a split second. But not the Stoic. The Stoic lives differently. He doesn't let the world push buttons in his brain like he's some kind of programmed machine. He doesn't hand over the keys to his peace every time something uncomfortable enters his path. No, the Stoic learns to pause. He breathes. He watches. He lets the emotion rise and pass, and only then does he act. Not out of fear, not out of pain, but out of clarity. That pause, that sacred space is his power, because that's where transformation lives. That's where wisdom breathes. Between stimulus and response is where you choose not only what you do, but who you become. Think about it. When someone insults you, when life throws chaos your way, when something unexpected turns your plans upside down, what happens first? Most people don't even notice. Their chest tightens, their voice rises, their face flushes, and suddenly they're no longer responding. They're reacting. That moment right there is the moment of surrender. Not surrender to the event itself, but to the emotion it sparked. And emotions, if left unchecked, are the puppeteers of chaos. They feel powerful. They feel real. But reaction, while it may feel strong, is often weakness dressed up as righteousness. It's the impulse to strike without aim, to speak without meaning, to hurt without intention. Reaction is the storm, but response is the eye within it. Response is calm. It's grounded. It's the decision to wait, to choose, to respond from the truth of your being rather than the heat of the moment. This is what the Stoics trained for, not to control the world, but to control how they met the world. They knew that power doesn't come from domination, but from discipline. That clarity isn't a gift. It's a muscle strengthened every time you resist the urge to be swept away. Marcus Aurelius once sat with the weight of the Roman Empire on his shoulders. Wars raging, betrayals close, death always nearby, and yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't poetic fancy. It was survival. He wasn't hiding from life. He was mastering how to meet it. Because when life gets loud, the wise get quiet. When the world pulls you toward chaos, the Stoic pulls inward. And it's not about being passive or cold. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing who you are, especially when life tries to choose for you. The Stoic doesn't flinch just because something is difficult. He doesn't scream just because something is unfair. He doesn't chase every insult or defend every opinion. He sees the gap. He steps into it, and he responds not with force, but with presence. That's where the real strength is. We've all made mistakes in the heat of the moment, sent that message we shouldn't have, said those words we couldn't take back, made decisions that looked brave on the outside but were really driven by fear, and later we're left holding the pieces, wondering how it all slipped through our fingers. But no one regrets the pause. No one looks back and says, "I wish I had yelled more," or "I should have panicked harder." Regret lives in reaction. Peace lives in response. And the difference between the two is not miles apart. It's a breath. One breath, one pause, one choice not to let the wave of emotion crash through everything you've built. The Stoic trains for that moment. Not to be perfect, but to be present. Not to be numb, but to be aware. He watches the rise of heat in his chest. He feels the pull of pride, the sting of ego, the surge of fear, but he doesn't let them dictate his next step. He breathes, he returns to himself, and then he responds not to win, not to control, but to align with what truly matters. So the next time something shakes you, pause. Don't reach for reaction like it's your only weapon. Don't give your energy to people who thrive on triggering others. Don't confuse urgency with importance. Instead, breathe, observe, ask yourself, not how do I strike back, but how do I want to show up right now? Because the person who insulted you doesn't get to define you. The plan that failed doesn't get to erase your value. The noise of the world doesn't get to drown your truth. Only you do. Only you choose whether to live by reaction or by intention, whether to let the outer storm become your inner state or to be the stillness that the storm can't touch. That's the heart of Stoicism. That's where power begins. Not in force, but in freedom. The freedom to pause, the freedom to see, the freedom to choose not what happens but how you respond to it. And in that choice, you don't just change the moment. You change who you are. There's a strange illusion that takes hold of the mind when it's overwhelmed. A belief that the more quickly we respond, the more control we have. But in truth, speed often betrays us. It pushes us into the arms of regret before we've even had a chance to breathe. The Stoic knew that power isn't in motion, but in the choice to still the storm within. Imagine a moment when you feel provoked. Your heart begins to race, your breath quickens, your voice tightens in your throat. The old version of you might lash out, write back, stand tall and angry, as if retaliation could restore your peace. But what if instead of reacting, you watched yourself not as a passive observer, but as a wise guardian of your energy? That's the shift. That is where the real strength is born, in the practice of waiting, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, because a calm breath is louder than a loud voice. When you slow your nervous system, you interrupt the chain that leads from feeling to fury. You become present. You begin to reclaim your ability to choose. And choice, true conscious choice, is where freedom begins. Every trigger becomes an invitation, not to fight, but to rise above. Not to win arguments, but to win your peace. Think about the power in that, in having the ability to observe a rising anger and say, not today. In being able to choose your silence as an act of power, not submission. In watching someone try to pull you into chaos and remaining unmoved because you've anchored yourself in something deeper. This is the art the Stoics practiced, not for performance, but for peace. It's not the world they tried to master, it was their own mind. Because when the world spins fast, only the still remains steady. Breath becomes your compass in that storm. Your breath, that thing you've always had but perhaps never honored, becomes the bridge between reaction and response. And it's not just spiritual, it's biological. It's physiology meeting philosophy. A long, intentional inhale tells your body that you are safe, even if your mind still remembers the pain. A steady exhale reminds your heart that calm is a choice. With practice, this becomes a reflex. Not the lashing out, not the caving in, but the pause, the grounding, the power of staying still when you could explode. The world may not understand it. It will tell you to speak fast, move fast, defend fast. But the wise know that silence holds truth, and stillness holds strength. That between stimulus and response lives the path to everything we are trying to become. When you reclaim that path, you reclaim yourself. And in doing so, you rise not above others, but above the version of you that once settled for chaos when peace was just a breath away. Time has a strange way of revealing what emotion tries to hide. In the heat of a moment, when the pulse quickens and the voice inside demands action, we often believe we're seeing things clearly, but clarity rarely lives in chaos. The Stoics understood this long before psychology could explain it. They knew that truth is patient, that what feels like urgency is often just emotion disguised as importance. Think of all the moments in your life where you reacted quickly, that harsh message you responded to instantly, that accusation you met with fire, that situation you judged without giving it time to unfold. Now think about how many of those moments you wish you could have revisited, not because you were wrong, but because your reaction was born from emotion, not understanding. That's the beauty of time. It gives shape to what felt formless. It turns assumptions into questions. It allows pain to be seen not as an enemy, but as a teacher. When you pause, truly pause, you begin to see that what you thought was betrayal may have been fear, that what you took as rejection may have been someone else's confusion, and that what felt like failure might have just been redirection. The Stoics didn't fear discomfort. They sat with it. They let it breathe. They let time filter through the noise so that what remained was wisdom, not reaction. Seneca said that anger, if not restrained, is often more hurtful than the injury that provoked it. How often has your reaction become the wound you carry longer than the event itself? How often has your rush to respond caused more damage than the silence that could have given you space to choose differently? In today's world, where quick replies are expected and emotional immediacy is mistaken for authenticity, restraint becomes a rare and powerful virtue. When you hold your words, you're not being weak, you're being discerning. You're giving yourself the gift of perspective. And in doing so, you're protecting your peace. Because not everything needs a response. Not every comment deserves your clarity. And some truths, the most important ones, only arrive after you've let the noise settle. Waiting is not inactivity. It's strength. It's faith that what's meant for you won't be lost in your silence. And that real understanding comes not in reaction but in reflection. Let others rush. Let the world shout. You be still. You listen. You watch. And when you do speak, let your words rise from clarity, not chaos. Let them be rooted in who you are, not in who the moment is trying to make you. That's the true Stoic way. Not coldness, but depth. Not silence from fear, but silence from power. And in that space, in that stillness, you find yourself again, not as a victim of the moment, but as the author of your response. There's a quiet wisdom in the act of stepping back before stepping in. It's subtle, almost invisible, yet it's the difference between acting from power and reacting from pain. Most people rush into situations with their emotions leading the way, convinced that speed equals strength, that speaking fast proves certainty, and that acting immediately means being in control. But often, it's the opposite. When you leap without pause, you are no longer the one in command. Your ego is, your anger is, your need to be right is, and that, the Stoics knew, is the beginning of your own unraveling. To pause before engaging is not withdrawal, it's preparation. It's scanning the battlefield not to avoid the war, but to fight only if necessary, and only with a clear mind. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He reminded himself constantly to return to his inner fortress before reacting to the chaos outside, because he knew the world is full of noise. Insults, disappointments, misjudgments, delays. But none of it can touch you if you've anchored yourself in clarity before responding. When someone disrespects you, your pride will push you to retaliate. But what if that instant anger is exactly what gives the other person control? What if your quick reply is not strength but surrender, a surrender to your own volatility? The real strength lies in restraint, in asking yourself, is this worth my energy? What is this moment really about? Is this a lesson or a test? And more importantly, what version of myself is being invited to show up here? Sometimes the pull to react is not about the moment in front of you but the unhealed version of you behind it. The wounded child, the rejected lover, the misunderstood soul. That's why stepping back is essential. Because it's not just about evaluating the situation, it's about checking in with yourself. Are you acting from truth or from trauma? From your values or from your wounds? When you take a moment to breathe before you act, you let your inner compass speak louder than the external noise. You choose alignment over agitation. You become intentional. And with that, your responses become precise, measured, powerful, not because they're loud, but because they come from a place of knowing, not needing. Think about all the arguments that spiraled out of control in your life. How many of them started with a simple misunderstanding that was met with a reactive jab instead of a patient breath? How many moments of joy were stolen because pride rushed ahead of peace? You don't need to fix everything immediately. You don't need to speak up the moment you're triggered. You don't need to explain your every move or justify your silence. You simply need to come back to yourself before moving forward. That's what the Stoic does. Not because he's indifferent, but because he understands that real power is not in action, it's in deliberate action. So next time you feel the urge to step in, stop, pull back, center yourself, ask, what would my highest self do in this moment? And then respond from that place, not from the wounded child, not from the scared ego, but from the wise inner observer. Because when you choose yourself first, everything else begins to align with the strength you carry within. Reactivity feels like power, but it's not. It's the illusion of strength, not its reality. It's like fire, hot, fast, fierce, but also chaotic, unpredictable, and often destructive. Most people walk through life as if they're carrying dry matches in their pocket, igniting at the smallest spark. A rude message, a dismissive glance, a slow driver, a missed call, and suddenly, their peace is gone. Their emotions flare, their words turn sharp, their mind spins stories that aren't true but feel urgent. And in those moments, they believe they're standing up for themselves, asserting their value, refusing to be disrespected. But what they're actually doing is handing over control to the emotion, to the trigger, to the chaos. This is the trap. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become a robot or numb your feelings. It asks you to master them, not by force, but by awareness. When you feel anger rising, when you feel that twitch of insecurity or the bite of pride, you don't have to obey it. You can observe it. You can breathe into it. You can sit with it long enough to realize, this feeling doesn't define me. And more importantly, this feeling doesn't deserve the keys to my behavior. Because here's the truth, every time you react without reflection, you become a puppet of your environment. You let the world play you like a game, pressing your buttons and pulling your strings. And it's exhausting. It drains your energy, corrodes your relationships, and leaves you wondering why you always feel ungrounded. But the Stoic knows another way, a way of reclaiming the mind, of choosing stillness instead of storm, of responding not from the wounded ego, but from the centered soul. It starts with a pause, just a second, just one breath. That's all it takes to flip the script from reaction to intention. Instead of saying what you'll regret, you say nothing. The world will test you. It will press your buttons, pull your heartstrings, poke your ego, and challenge your peace. You can't stop that. What you can do is decide, will I be an echo or will I be a presence? Will I mirror the chaos or will I anchor in stillness? The Stoic doesn't need to prove. He doesn't need to win arguments or outshout the world. His victory is silent. His strength is invisible. It lives in the space no one sees, the moment when he chooses not to react, but to respond. When he chooses breath over blame. When he chooses stillness over self-defense. When he walks away, not because he's weak, but because he knows his peace is worth more than anyone's approval. So take this with you, into your conversations, your relationships, your work, your storms. Breathe before you speak. Watch before you act. Ask yourself not, how do I get even? But, how do I stay aligned? Because every time you protect your energy, every time you let go of the need to explain, every time you choose silence over noise, you are shaping something far deeper than a moment. You are shaping who you are. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And what braver act is there than not reacting? What greater freedom than to own your mind, your breath, your choices? In a world that is constantly reacting, to respond with wisdom is to rise above. It is to say, I know who I am, I know what matters, and I refuse to lose myself to win anyone else. The sacred pause is not weakness, it is power. It is not indecision, it is precision. It is not avoidance, it is awareness. So next time life provokes you with a comment, a challenge, a wave of emotion, remember this: you are not the wave. You are the shore. You are not the spark. You are the space around the flame. You are not the noise. You are the breath between the words. And in that breath, you have everything: power, presence, peace. That is how a Stoic lives. That is how a wise soul walks through fire without being burned. That is how you, today, begin to transform not just your reactions, but your entire reality. Absolutely, Zishan. Here's a unique and powerful conclusion for your Zen Awakening script that ties the Stoic philosophy together in a way that resonates deeply with the viewer. In the end, life won't always go the way you expect. People will misunderstand you. Circumstances will unravel. Emotions will surge. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to react, to prove, to protect, to lash out. But the real test is not what happens around you. It's what happens within you. Because power, the kind that lasts, isn't loud. It isn't reactive. It doesn't need to be right or praised or feared. Real power is quiet, intentional, rooted in the space between what was said and what you decide to say, between what happened and what you choose to carry forward. This is where transformation happens, in that space. The moment you choose to breathe instead of blame. The second you sit with discomfort instead of fighting it. The instant you pause long enough to hear the voice of wisdom rise above the noise. That's when you stop being a puppet to your circumstances and become the author of your own reality. That's where your peace is protected, your dignity preserved, your spirit unshaken. So walk forward from here not needing to control the world, but choosing to master yourself. Hold that pause like a shield. Let your breath lead your decisions. Speak only when it serves your values, not your ego. And never forget, your calm is your crown. Your stillness is your strength. Your silence, when rooted in understanding, is more powerful than 1,000 words spoken in haste. Let others chase the fire. You stay grounded. Let the world react. You respond. Because when you live like that, from presence, not panic, from clarity, not chaos, you don't just survive the noise of life. You rise above it. That is the Buddhist way. That is the awakened way. That is your way now.